Welcome back to another episode of For the Love of Lore. I am Austin, your co-host for today's adventure.
And I'm Abby. We're so glad you're here.
And today in Middle-earth, we will be learning about how the elves fared on their trip to Valinor by way of the Beleriand, and about the birth of their renowned Feanor.
And over in Westeros, we're going to explore the Riverlands and get acquainted with the Tully family.
So, grab a flagon of ale and
Let's
go on an adventure. All right, so we're back with episode number
4.
4.
Quattro.
We did it. We're on a roll.
We are, yeah.
I am proud of us.
Look at us doing the hard things.
We have shortened the intro a skosh. Now that we're all familiar with each other, we're all besties here. Speaking of being besties, let's do a little check-in. How you been, Sess?
You know, so you might not be listening to it at this time, but the time we're filming, I just went back to work after Christmas break a couple days ago. So I am all kinds of tired. I'm in that winter depression that everybody is in, I think, right now.
Hitting hard.
So yeah, the classes I teach, they change every semester. So like I just got like brand new students and my schedule is a little bit different. But this first day is always such a letdown compared to the first day in August. Like in August, all the kids are like,
back to school.
And then like yesterday when I tried to introduce myself to the students, like, cause they don't know me yet, they were all just like, great.
We're sick of it already. And I get it. It's not your fault. It's just the winter blues. And I have much the same. It's weird because I work in the landscaping world, and usually in a normal landscaping company, December to February is like your reset time because it's cold. You can't do any mowing. You can't do any mulch. You can't do any rocks. But we don't do that. We work year round where we do Christmas setups and tear downs, and now we're doing snow removal, and then we're dabbling in some other areas that I don't know if I can talk about because I don't know when this is going to come out, when news articles are going to come out. Regardless, a lot of things are happening at this company, and I have just been named as VP of the company, which is cool.
Yay, that's exciting.
It is. Nerve-wracking, but I'm really excited for it.
Well, hey.
I know, but I am feeling the blues because now it's just like instead of going into a nice hibernation,
right?
It's full on go. So I'm feeling the tiredness and the winter depression myself.
Yeah.
But exciting, nonetheless.
Exciting.
Speaking of exciting.
I'm ready.
Let me tell you. The Silmarillion, you don't usually think those two words go together, exciting and Silmarillion, but
you wait.
We're here. Folks, I was just telling Abby right before the podcast. We have now hit the point in this frickin' book, I'm keeping it PG, that we can now have some intrigue and some interest.
Okay.
I'm not saying it was bad before. I'm just saying it's an info dump before.
Yes.
It's a lot of exposition. It's a lot of setting the narrative, a lot of characters. Now we can finally have a plot, and it's fun, and I like it. So
I'm ready. I'm buckled.
Let's all strap in, and let's go for a ride. So we are now at chapter 5. It is called Of Eldamar and the Princes of the Elderly. And a pretty vague title. It's funny that he named it this chapter because the Eldamar and the princes really aren't talked about that much. So I'm still confused why. I'm sure a real Tolkien lore nerd would tell me well, this is why, bro.
Well,
we don't listen to that.
Someday we'll be able to.
I'll look back at myself and scoff, I'm sure.
We'll revisit this episode.
Yes, and be like, well, that's why, you dingus. Anyways, so bit of a recap from last week just to catch everybody up again because it was a lot. And we had Mr. Tolkien himself here, Alex Swanson. Yeah. So it was just Tolkien's birthday.
It would have been his 133rd birthday. I like to think he would have a party like Bilbo.
I do too. And if you checked our socials, it would be Instagram, and our handle is
at forthelove.lore.
There's a humble plug right there. Check out the Insta. Abby over here is doing such a good job with it, making quality posts every day, keeping the audience engaged. I see the follower numbers going up every day, so good job, sis. I applaud you.
Thanks.
But a quick recap here of chapter 4. So this is when all the elves, the Vaenor, the Noldor, and the To-Tully, the 3 factions of elves, are all deciding to leave Middle-earth because it's getting a little sketch. So it's the Vaenor and the Noldor who are all like, yeah, let's go. Like, we're good. But it's the To-Tully who are a little hesitant. They're like, I don't know if I want to go. And I get into that a little bit here in a second because that is actually up for discussion of why they don't go. And Tolkien even acknowledges it himself. But anyways, so at this point, the Vaenor and the Noldor have reached the westernmost shores of Middle-earth. And they are now at the narrowest part between Middle-earth and Aman. And I wanted to give kind of a quick recap because I was doing some editing of last week's episode and listening in, and I think it gets a little confusing about the names of these places, so I just want to recap everything. So Arda is Earth. Middle-earth, we all know what Middle-earth is. And then there's Aman. And Aman is called the Undying Lands, and we also talk about Valinor a lot. So I'm going to do a visual for all you YouTube viewers. So Middle-earth, well, I got to think of how the screen is. Doesn't matter. Middle-earth is here. Technically, Aman is west, so I don't know if I'm doing this correct on your screen, but it doesn't matter. But the way these lands are shaped, the continents, they almost touch at their northern point. So the elves have decided to get to Aman, which is the west country. They want to go to the kind of northwest-ish of Middle-earth, just so it's a short sail across. Not a lot of hoopla, not a lot of stuff to mess with, just an easy sail.
The big sail would be more treacherous?
Yes, okay. And I'll tell you why here in a second. So, so other part too, Valinor is inside Aman. You can think of Valinor as like a big country inside Aman, but Valinor is described as being like the most beautiful, the most life, all that jazz.
Okay.
So, yeah, the elves make their way northwest, and they're like, we don't know how to sail. We just they're thinking they can swim there at this point. Like that's their line of thinking because the elves are still fairly new. They don't have much technology. The most they really have is, like, just think of it as like, they've got sticks for spears, and they know how to make fire, but that's really about it. So they make this treacherous quest, and we talked about it last week. Check out last week's episode. Alex did a good job filling in some gaps for me. But they make this big move northwest, and when they get there, they're like, uh-oh, because they notice that the seas in the north, that narrow sea, is frozen over.
A narrow sea?
Yes, I know, a connection.
Yeah.
The sea is frozen over actually due to Melkor's influence and his, what they always call his disruption, or gosh, what else? Discord. That's another word they always use. So the discord of his song is actually creating an ice, because his kingdom, his castle, is up in the north. So it's all deriving from that castle and spreading out. If you hear squeaking, that is our
That's my dog. She's
Gracie?
nuts. Sorry.
Come here.
Leave it alone.
Okay, you're cute. I know. So his castle is creating all this coldness, which is a link to his discord. So anyways, they can't cross it here because it's too cold. I'm going to get this ball from this dog. So back to Melkor and his discord.
Well, she's Melkor right now.
You are Melkor.
She's discording.
But we love you. You're a good Melkor. Anyway, so they notice that the sea is frozen over, and they're like, well, that's not good. So Orome, one of the leaders, decides, all right, let's not all sit here in fear. Let's move a little south and see if we can just cross there. So he leads the host of elves south, and the sea does, it's very short the north, and as they go down, it's a pretty steep increase in how far they have to go. So they get south, they feel better, they're warm again, they're with the trees, they're with nature, all that hoopla. But then they look out to the sea, and it's just darkness because it's too far. They can't swim there anymore, so now they're stricken with fear, and they're like, well, now we're trapped on the edge of Middle-earth with evil descending upon us. Their backs are literally to a cliff right now. So they're kind of, they feel they don't have any hope. And where they are is they are on the shores of Beleriand. I can never pronounce this word right. Beleriand, yeah. And it's a pretty quick mention here, but Beleriand, I'm going to go with that, is a massive part of elves lore in Middle-earth. I mean, it's where a lot of future events are going to take place. It's where the elves of Linden derive from. If you watched Rings of Power, that's a big part of that show, Lindon.
And this is, sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, this is what.
I'm pretty sure Beleriand is Aegon the Conqueror's.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Just
So see, that's where I think Martin gets some
influence.
from Tolkien.
He was the original influencer.
I forgot. It's a great claim. Maybe the best claim of all time. Anyways, yes, this part of Middle-earth will come up again later. A lot of wars will take place here. Melkor will have his influence here, you'll see. But the elves are in mid-panic, and that is when Ulmo, one of the Valar I talked about in episode 1, or maybe 2. No, 2.
Yeah.
In episode 2, you can think of him as like Poseidon. He's like the god of the seas.
Okay.
So he is asked by the Valar to go to the elves and kind of give them some hope. And of course, in classic Tolkien way, he says Ulmo inspired them with his words and his songs. And it's like, okay, I get the song thing, Tolkien. Let's go. So he's a trumpet player. Does that really matter in the grand scheme of lore? No, but thought I would mention it.
Fun little anecdote.
But I like the vision of it because it's always described as like they can hear trumpets coming from the sea. And I think that would be kind of like an ominous but kind of cool thing to envision. So Ulmo comes. He's like, yo, you guys are fine. I'm like, you'll be good. Come on. I'm obviously paraphrasing. He did not word it this way.
He sounds like an Italian uncle.
Come on, get on over here. So the elves who decide to go with Ulmo and trust him are called the Eldar. And the Eldar will come up a lot more in the future. They are kind of, their name kind of insinuates that they are the old and kind of the higher ups of the elves because they chose to trust the Valar. They chose to trust Ulmo and go across the sea. And the way that they describe how the Eldar, which is, again, just Noldor and... oh, God, I'm forgetting the other name of the faction of elves. The Vanyar. Gosh, I always forget that name. The way that Noldor and the Vanyar got across, which are now called the Eldar, Ulmo, basically summons an island from under the water and has them float across the sea on that. Because, again, ships haven't been invented yet.
Okay, yeah, I wondered.
So... I don't know. It's kind of crazy to think about, but why not? It's Middle-earth. So he takes this pocket of land across to Aman.
Okay.
And kind of, again, Aman and Middle-earth are both shaped like crescents. So you can think of this island being placed kind of right in the center of the crescent. And it is mentioned that it does not touch the land of Aman. It is more placed there as an island. Okay. And this island will be known as later on Tol Eressëa. And it's a place of importance that will come up again later in these chapters. But Ulmo is kind of the go. Yeah. Dude can just summon land like it's nothing.
Like Maui.
Yeah. Yes. He is the Tolkien Maui. So now the Eldar, which again is the Vanyar and the Noldor, enter Valinor, the promised land, if you will, and they are overcome with bliss.
Dang, I love that.
Yeah. So it's beautiful. Trees. You have the two trees that are emitting light that kind of act like the sun, so it's beautiful. And he does mention that the elves, even the Tully, who have been hesitant to come, yearn to see the light of the trees. So that's why when the Eldar see it for the first time, they're just like, oh my God. So now we go back to the Tully, the poor old Tully. And so it is mentioned they dwell way in the east of Middle-earth because Noldor and the Vanyar were kind of in the middle, and that's why they were,
it was easier to get
over.
Okay.
Tolkien mentions that the Tully were so far east that they couldn't hear the songs and the words of Ulmo.
Okay.
And I I think he mentions that because that's all he says about it, is that they were too far east to hear the songs and the words of Olmo. And I think what this is insinuating is that they actually would have gone,
Okay.
but it's in the lore of elves, the Tully were resistant to going.
Right.
It is believed that they were like, no, I don't want to go. But Tolkien kind of insinuates here, like, if they heard the songs and they built up the river, they would have gone.
Or is it like when I tell my kids to do the dishes and they don't hear me?
Yes. So that's why it's actually up for debate of like, are the Tully really the bad kids, or did they just not hear the call?
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
So it's a point of contention. I don't really lean either way. I kind of think I think they were just bad kids and didn't want to go.
Okay.
But the Tully have a huge influence on Middle Earth later. Obviously, they help fight in the Battle of Five Armies. They march with the Last Alliance at the end of the Second Age. So, I mean, they're involved. And they shape a lot of Middle Earth. And, I mean, Legolas obviously did a lot. So I think they are redeemed is what I think the storyline is going after here.
Okay.
That's why I think they were naughty at first and then they're redeemed later. So
Yeah.
up to your interpretation, but that is just my guess. So anyways, now the Tully, they do communicate with the other two factions of elves before they leave, and then they stop hearing from the other two factions, and he mentions that they are filled with sadness because their friends and their brothers left. So now they're like, okay, maybe we should go west. So they all go west towards the sea because they miss their kin so much that they want to be as close to them as possible, even if they can't get over there.
Okay.
So they get over there and they become so enamored by the sea because, again, this point they're in the east, and if you look at a map of Middle Earth, the east is just desert. So I think, they obviously went through some greens and forests, but then they get to the ocean, they're just enamored by it. I think it's just a classic, like you live in sand, but then you see water for the first time, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Dune. Like they were like the people of Arrakis are like they wish for a water planet essentially. So I think that's what the Tully get, and they're like, oh my god, it is beautiful, and blah blah blah. So now the Eldar, they've lived in some peace for some time, and they're like, Olmo, can you go back and get our bros? And he's a little reluctant at first. But he does end up going back, and he converses with Osei, who is the leader of the Tully at the time. But Osei has become a little obsessed. Yes, he begins to covet the shores of. Oh God, I have to scroll back up. I'm so sorry, fandom.
It's fine.
Beleriand. God, I always forget that name. He's become so enamored by the shores there that he's like, I don't want to leave. So obviously, some are like, well, that guy's an idiot, we're leaving. So most of them do leave, but a small sect of them stay behind, and they are known as the Philothrim. But in later days, that Philothrim, you don't really need to know. What you do need to know is that they become the first makers of ships. So they invent ships, and now sailing is a thing.
Okay.
And
More power.
more power. Yes, we can navigate the seas. And you LOTR nerds will know this name. The person who is chosen as the Lord of the Philothrim is Círdan, the shipwright.
Okay, we met him.
We did.
Okay.
Nice. Yes. So in Rings of, for you casual fans, in Rings of Power, Círdan does show up in the second season. He is.
I liked him.
Yes, he is still in the very far west on the shores. He is the best shipbuilder in all of Middle Earth, and will stay that way for all the way through the Third Age. So, big character to know. Eventually, in Middle Earth, he will become the oldest elf in Middle Earth because he will be the last of the Philothrim to stay.
Okay.
So, fun fact.
Oh, okay.
So, now this is a kind of a quick tangent by me. It's very quick in the book, this part, but I think it's important the whole nerdum. So now we've got the Tully, we've got the Vanyas, and then we got the Noldor all chilling in Valar. Most of them are still sitting on the island that moved because they think that's just so beautiful now. And they actually name it the Lonely Island because the elves who live in the Promised Land are like, they feel bad for them, but the people now are like, no, we're happy. So it's strange.
Do they sing "I'm on a boat"?
I wish they did. If Tolkien was the original author of that, I would be enamored. Amazing. So Yavanna, who I talked about in the past, she's kind of the goddess of beauty and nature. She knows how much the elves long to see the beauty of the trees. So it's a whole paragraph that, yes, it's written in English, but man, it makes no sense because he describes this whole thing of like how she makes these mirrors that reflect the light of the trees all the way to this lonely island for them. It's a whole thing. Okay. It's not important. What is important is that she actually goes so far as to plant a tree for them that is taken from a seedling from one of the great trees. So that tree, the seedling she took from is called Telperion. And the one that she plants on the lonely island for them is called Galafleon. And the connection to the Lord of the Rings we know is that in the books, Legolas actually hints that the doors of Durin, which is the Mines of Moria, the tree on that door is actually modeled after Galafleon because it's, the two main trees have a glow to them. This one does not, but it is described as the fullest, most beautiful tree, and it's massive. So that's a little.
The speak, friend, and enter
Yes.
tree? Okay.
Yes. So the tree on that door, on that symbol, is actually the depiction of this tree. So I thought that was a fun little nod to the Lord of the Rings. And then they take seedlings from Galafleon, and then they plant another one, and it's called Celeborn, which is a name that will be very, very important coming up. Remember that one. And then from Celeborn, they get Nimloth, which is the white tree of Numenor.
Ah.
Yes, that we see leaves falling off in the Rings of Power, but it's beautiful. So then from that tree comes the tree of Gondor. So that's what I'm saying is like, it's very quick in this book, the discussion of trees, but it's one of the biggest uses of imagery he has, I think, is a tree. I think it's just the tree of life type situation, the roots in the ground and the sprouting. He loves trees.
And the Ents are my favorite characters.
Yes, I mean, so we got the Ents. So I wanted to have this quick tangent. Again, this was like 2 sentences in the book, but I wanted to cover it because I think it's really cool. And I, as a Tolkien nerd, I actually have a bit of the tree of Gondor right here on my chest. This is the tattoo I inevitably want, is the tree of Gondor. But maybe now that I know about these other trees, I'll reevaluate. So heavy tree use in Tolkien lore.
Heavy tree use.
Heavy tree use. A lot of it.
It's all right. We like it.
Yeah. So after that quick tangent, so now the Noldor elves and Aule, who is the creator of the dwarves.
Married to Yavanna.
Yes. Abby, look at you.
I know.
The Noldor and Aule become besties. They're like, oh, you're cool. And Aule's like, yeah, you guys are kind of cool too. And they actually begin to discover the riches of the earth, which I think we've heard from dwarves before. They find vibrant and rich gems in Valinor. So now the Noldor, he does specifically mention that the Noldor don't covet these gems. They don't hog them. They don't covet, I guess is a good word.
They don't trade for them.
Yes, they're very open with it. They share it with the other tribes of elves. They share it with the Valar. But what they do start to do is they start to make weapons. They start to make armor. They start to make technology out of these gems. And this is where the science and the culture of elves really comes alive is in this age, because they now are discovering all these new things they can do. They're building ships now. They're building actual weapons that they can fight back with. So it's really the start. It's up for contention when the first age starts. And I think, in my opinion, it really starts here because, as I'll mention in a second, this is actually when they find out how to start writing.
Oh.
And I'll mention that here shortly.
Okay.
But I think this is kind of the start of the first age for the elves, because they've really come into their own culture and their own science, and they start to prosper. A lot of you hardcore nerds are going to be like, no, when the elves first wake up, I don't care. That's my take. But anyways, so they started fashioning all these tools, and It does say they don't covet them, but it does say the Noldor only want more. So they start to crave more and more and more, which can be bad. So this passion actually drives them to ask to go back to Middle Earth. And Tolkien kind of leaves that there for now, but that is a big plot point that the Noldor want to go back. So now Tolkien takes a huge swing into more names. Here we go. So Finwë is now named the King of the Noldor, and he is a very respectable elf in his own right. But it's actually his kin and his sons that will be remembered more than him. So his sons are Faenor, Fingolfin, and Finarfin. I know. You say that 3 times fast.
Fingolfin, that sounds like I'm finna go golf.
I'm a finna go golfing right now.
Sorry.
I mean, you're in paradise. What else are you going to do?
Yep. And Feanor is in the title of this episode.
Good catch. And he is the most important character for the next few chapters of the Silmarillion. Because I was talking about how we now have a plot line. It starts right here with the birth of Feanor. So the most important, like I just said, is Feanor, who becomes kind of the protagonist. The protagonist of the Silmarillion for a very short time. He's described as being very smart, with his skill of a word and of hand, which I don't know what that means. I kind of think it just means he's a wordsmith and he's good at creating things.
Or he talks with his hands.
Yes, maybe he's just very, there's a word for that, and I don't know what it is.
Expressive.
Yes, expressive is a good word. Could be. So there's I'll do a little more on him later, but very pivotal character in the story going forward. So now, once again, as Tolkien does, he goes a little name crazy. I am going to skip over most of them at this point because I did some research and some peeking ahead in the book. Most of these names are either one-offs and they're never mentioned again, or their stories are pretty short and sweet and they end in 2 sentences. So I'm skipping most of them. I'm sorry, I just don't think they're very important. I think it's just word vomit at this point. But the one I want to talk about is Finarfin, the brother of Feanor.
Okay.
So he has 5 children, and there are 2 of which are very big. So their names are Finrod, who was in the Rings of Power, and Galadriel. Dun, dun, dun. So there it is. So that is how Galadriel was born. She is actually, a niece of Feanor, which is huge. So this also really shows how old Galadriel is, how much she's seen, how much she's been through. And she is described as, in this time, the most beautiful of all the house of Finwë. Her hair was lit with gold as though it had caught in a mesh the radiance of Lorlian. I said that right for sure. Anyways, classic Galadriel. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's the best. She's a goat. Okay. But that's all in Galadriel for now, but she will come back later. And then to close this chapter, Tolkien really just discusses how Feanor and his family travel all over Valinor seeking the unknown. And that's kind of where he lays it. And it's kind of ominous because if you know the story of Feanor, it's a hint, it's a little bit of foreshadowing as to what is to come. So that's chapter 5. And it's a lot, but now we are starting to see the formulation of a plot around Feanor. And now with chapter 6, we go. So now the elves, this is chapter 6, which is called Feanor and the Unchaining of Melkor. I'm telling you, plot goes here now.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No. So we now enter the next era of peace for the elves, which is called noontide, which I kind of like that word. I don't know right. Yes, noontide of the blessed realm. I mean, I want to go.
I love a noontide.
I love a noontide. Is that a real word?
It's like a high noon.
Yes.
But with a tide.
With a tide. Anyways, during this time, the elves prosper. It is noted that they become taller in stature, of body, and mind. So they're getting taller, they're getting bigger, stronger, smarter. The whole 9 yards. The Noldor continue mining and creating new technology, and it is during noontide that the invention of writing is established.
Okay.
So in the future talk of elves, they'll always talk about noontide and how happy these times were, and something they'll always chase for the rest of their time on Middle Earth and on Aman. So pivotal time, everybody's happy, partying, writing stuff down for the first time. So now Tolkien kind of gives the backstory on Feanor. His real name, and I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher this. His real name is Cura Finwë. Maybe I nailed that, who knows? But his mom is the one who calls him Faenor, and it's because Faenor means the spirit of fire. I mean, it's a pretty sick name. Muriel was his mother's name, and once again, you hardcore nerds, and even now average fans will know Muriel is the name of a queen of Numenor. She's the one who becomes blind in the show.
Okay, yeah.
That's Muriel, named after.
Wait, she's his mom?
No, Muriel in the show is named after this Muriel.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I got it.
And you'll see why, because she's beloved by Elvendom because of her tragic story. A little bit of a spoiler, but here it is. It is said that she was consumed in spirit and body by giving birth to Feanor. So she says that she cannot give birth ever again because the strength that would have nourished the life of many has gone forth into Feanor, which I think is Tolkien's way of saying Feanor is that dude. That dude is strong. That dude's got the life of many elves inside of him, so he's bound for greatness, kind of. I think that's what that meant.
Okay.
So this is where Feanor's first tragedy really comes. It's a tough story, but I'm going to cover it. Finwë is kind of unpleased with his wife because he wants more kids. We're getting a little bit of a toxic masculinity situation here.
Yeah.
So Muriel is sent away to be healed, and she's sent to Lorien, and Tolkien, I think he's trying to cover his base here. He describes their love as very strong at this point. I've got bad vibes. I don't know. You don't send your wife away,
Nope.
especially right after the kid is born, and she's sickly, and she's like, I can't do this, but you want her to do it. It doesn't read well.
At least Lorien's not an asylum.
Yes, it is beautiful. Lorien is beautiful,
Yeah.
but
It's more like a rehab.
yes, it's not great. So anyway, she goes to Lorien, where she immediately falls into a deep slumber and unfortunately passes away. So yeah, I know. So she passes away alone. She doesn't know what happened to Feanor, and it does go on to say that her body never withers. I think even all the way through the events of Lord of the Third Age.
Okay.
I think is because she is made kind of a symbol by the Valar of love for a child that is forsaken by the husband, the man, whatever you want to call it. But Finwë does come to visit her, and he tries to wake her up because, they all just think she's in a deep slumber.
Yeah.
They're all still a little confused by death at this point. But he calls out to her, and she doesn't wake up, and he does grieve heavily. I'm like, bro, you kind of did that.
Yeah.
So he leaves Lorien forever because the grief was too much to bear. So now we kind of jump forward. Feanor, he does struggle with this quite a bit, but he does grow older and stronger. And they do say he grows pretty quickly, as if a secret fire were kindled within him. More foreshadowing.
Okay.
So he is described as tall, with raven black hair, and an incredible intellect. So he kind of, as he's getting into his late teens and young adult, he discovers how to forge his own gems, which kind of leads to the invention of telescopes. Fun fact.
That is fun.
There's a couple other inventions they mention, which it's more magic-y and less real-life technical things. There's this one, they talk about how he can make a white stone glow with blue fire inside.
Oh.
I'm not sure what that's a mention or what that's a link to, but it's in one of his inventions. I'm assuming what it's supposed to be is the little light that Frodo gets from Galadriel. I think it's a nod to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Arendelle.
The Light of Arendelle. Oh my God, which is one of the friggin' Valar. And we're back. So it's a nod to the Light of Arendelle that Galadriel gives to Frodo, I think, that Feanor actually made. And now we know that is her uncle
Yeah.
who made it. So cool little nod. So now Feanor, he marries Nerdinel, a real nerd. Unfortunately, their marriage is described as doomed because Feanor's passions were just too much for Nerdinel. I mean, we talked about last chapter how Feanor and his family traveled all over
Yeah.
Aman. She did not like that. She was like, I just want a peaceful life. And he's like, but there's so much to see. So it was doomed. And at this time, this is the first real tragedy of Feanor. Finwë remarries. And Feanor don't like that. Feanor is not happy about that.
The evil stepmother trope.
A little. So Tolkien hints that if Finwë never remarried, and this is a direct quote, later, many saw the effect of this breach. Had Finwë endured his loss and been content with being a father, the courses of Feanor would have been otherwise, and great evil might have been prevented. So, pretty pivotal point for Feanor here. It's a heck of a foreshadowing in the chapter. You're just reading this like, oh boy, what is going to go down? And I tell you, it was a very pivotal moment for Feanor and his father. And it's no bueno for Feanor. So anyways, that's where Tolkien leaves that. He leaves it in kind of a cliffhanger. And then we get into talking about Melkor, which is, I think is also a bit of foreshadowing that we go straight to Melkor POV. So Melkor has been kept in bondage for 3 ages, which was the punishment decreed by the Valar. He is then released because they say he paid his dues. And when he is meeting with the Valar, he can kind of see the happiness of the Valar. He can see the elves, the children of Iluvatar that he hates. And he can see all the gems they found, and he's filled with jealousy. But he hides it because he knows he has to put on a good face to kind of get released.
Like probation.
Yes.
Okay.
So Melkor pleads for his freedom and promises to aid the Valar and, looking for the gems, creating new technologies, all that kind of stuff. And Manwë begrudgingly grants him this pardon. But he is kept within the gates of Valmar, which is one of the cities in Aman. Can't leave. He's confined to the walls, but he is free to do whatever he wants in those walls. So Melkor does keep his word, and he helps the elves. He grants them, because they grant him freedom to do these acts, and Manwë even believes that the evil of Melkor has been cured.
Okay.
I'm like, as a viewer, you're like, why the heck would you believe or trust this guy who has backstabbed you multiple times? Tolkien mentions right after that Manwë has no knowledge of evil, so he can't really comprehend it. Because again, the elves of this time the elves and the Valar just know happiness. They don't have a dark side of this. They don't know what grief is. They don't know what sadness is. They don't know what loss is. Like it's foreign to them. So it's a little like cliche of like, why would you trust Melkor? But like, ignorance is bliss, I guess, because they just don't understand that Melkor still has his hatred in his heart, and he does aspire to ruin everything. But he does also then go mention that not all were deceived. Ulmo, the god of the seas, Trumpet, and Tulkas, the soldier, Tolkien, they were heavily suspicious. They watched Melkor's every move. Every time they passed him in the streets, they gave him a glare. They don't trust. No trust. Okay. No trust. So with his newfound freedom, Melkor begins to go to work again. So he sees the strength in Noldor. This is, again, the faction of elves who are mining and exploring. Melkor does look at the other 2 factions of elves, but he determines they're just too weak. So he's like, the Noldor are strong. I can manipulate that. Let's go work my magic. So he begins to whisper to the high elves and the council of the Noldor that Feanor's accomplishments actually came from Melkor. He's telling them, Feanor only built the telescope and this stone because of my advice. That was my doing. And many of them believed him.
Fake news.
Fake news. And that is where the chapter actually comes to an end. I know.
That's a cliffhanger.
Another cliffhanger.
That's the most cliffhanger I've ever.
I know. So that's what I'm saying is like the plot has now begun. And I think I said every episode, like, now we can go on with the story. But now we really are in the thick of it because Melkor is trying to corrupt the Noldor elves in the schemes to try to get him back to Middle-earth because he knows they want to go back to Middle-earth. He's also trying to sow discord because he knows how strong Feanor is, and he's trying to kind of break up that faction. So the last note that Tolkien does clarify in the chapter, the last few sentences are that Feanor hates Melkor, actually more than any of the other elves. He distrusts him, and he's actually the first person to call him Morgoth, which is the name he will really be known in all of Lordom. But he does mention that Feanor, just to clarify, I think that Feanor did do this himself. It was not at the advice of Melkor.
Right.
but this is kind of the first seedling of the elves' faults and eventually, what do you want to call it? War, I guess. So I think it was chapter 6 of Silmarillion. We have now hit the gas pedal, folks. So I'm really excited to get into the next few chapters because it's Feanor's story, it's Melkor's story, and those two. I already said it earlier. It's pretty tragic, but it is a very good story. And I'm excited to tell you guys in the next few weeks. But that's it.
All right. I liked it.
I'm sorry, long week for me. I know that's usually more than I talk, but
Hey,
I
now
wasn't.
that we're in the plot.
Yes, we are in the thick of it. So I'm excited to see where it goes, and we're rooting for Faenor, but I'm worried about him.
Yeah, he's got some trauma.
Drama. Been through a lot.
Yeah, baggage.
Yeah, a lot of baggage. And speaking of baggage, I don't know how I'm going to fit this into the Riverlands and House Tully, but
I don't know. But we could, yeah, no, we don't have to. That's not
but now, yes, we pivot to the lands
to
of
Westeros. Welcome to the Riverlands.
Woo!
That is where we are at in Westeros
Yes.
today. We are just south of the north, but it's like they're neighbors. But so in the old times, in the OG times, the Riverlands were known as the Kingdom of Rivers and Hills.
I like that better.
Yeah, I know.
Kingdom of Rivers.
And Hills.
Maybe the and hills is a bit of a stretch, but I like Kingdom of Rivers.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It really describing this little kingdom reminds me that like that's where we live. Like
Yeah.
like in real life, IRL, Illinois is the Riverlands.
Kind of
There's
is.
rivers everywhere. So the Riverland Kingdom itself is truly the heart of the Seven Kingdoms. It is smack dab in the middle. They share a border with 5 of the other 6 kingdoms. The only kingdom they don't share a border with is Dorne, but they share a border with the Reach, the Stormlands, the Crownlands, the North, and then the Iron Islands are just kind of like right off the shore from the Riverlands. So they are all right there. However, because of that, these lands, the Riverlands, have seen more battles than any other kingdom in Westeros.
Oof.
So yeah, because it's easily invaded. There's not a lot of natural barriers between their lands and the other lands, so it's hard to defend it unless you build a bunch of castles along your walls, but they haven't. Not to mention they like to pick fights with each other, which doesn't
They don't help themselves.
help. Does not helpful.
No.
But nonetheless, it is a rich, fertile land with, it's got a huge river running through it. That river is super important. It's called the Trident. And we will talk all about the Trident in just a minute. But the Trident there's the Trident itself, and then it's got these 3 little branches off of it that are also pretty big rivers. Just the branches are, and then they all combine into this massive Trident River. So that's why the land is so fertile, because it's very wet, easy to like irrigate. Is that the word?
Oh, yes. Nailed it.
Lots of irrigation happening. Yes, and there's not really any mountains, just hills.
It's Illinois. Wow.
So yes, there's no actual cities in the Riverlands. Like if you remember, way back to episode 1. In the north, there's only one true city, and it's White Harbor. The Riverlands does not have that. They do have lots of towns, villages, keeps, castles, things like that, but no actual, like a trade city or anything. It's more so that all these towns and villages are like closely packed together. I guess not packed, but like they're much closer together than, say, the towns in the north. Fun fact, bastards born in the Riverlands have the last name Rivers. So if you remember, every kingdom has their own little last name for if you're born out of wedlock. In the north, your last name becomes Snow. Down here in the Riverlands, it would be Rivers. And then in episode 2, we talked about Brynden Rivers. So he obviously was born here in the Riverlands. I think his mom was a lady from one of the houses. I can't remember. I should, because I just talked about it. But so yeah, and he is the one that eventually becomes like the three-eyed raven,
Yep. And then he's in the tree.
Yeah, he's in the tree. So this land is old. Lots of important people come from these lands, as you'll see in just a minute. So let's dive in. You ready?
I am so ready.
Dive into
Let's
the
dive into it. You stole my line. Dang it.
All right, so let's start with the Trident and its three forks. So the Trident is this massive river, think like the Mississippi River. It's so wide at certain points, actually at a lot of points, that if you're just looking at it from the shore or the riverbank, you would probably think it's like a lake. That's how wide it is. It's not your average little river where you can stand on one bank and look across to the other bank and be like, maybe I could swim or maybe I should get a boat. Who knows? This is a river where you definitely need a boat or a bridge to cross. So that comes into play much later, as we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, it's hard to cross it, especially when it's at its widest. And then why it's so big. It's got these three tributaries or forks or whatever you want to call it. It's got more than three, but the three biggest ones are the ones that get mentioned the most often. So I'm going to tell you about those. The Red Fork is first. Supposedly, the Red Fork gets its name because it begins in a mountain range that's actually over in the Westerlands, which is like Casterly Rock, those lands. And then it kind of snakes its way through the mountain range and slowly comes down into the Riverlands. It does run straight by River Run, like right up to the castle wall. And River Run is kind of the capital city of the Riverlands, so it's an important spot. And so anyway, supposedly it's called the Red Fork because of all the like silt and mud that gets trapped in the water from the mountains. So that's what they say so far. I have my own thought. I'll tell you in a second. And then important little places along the Red Fork are, of course, River Run, the capital city, and then another city or town called Pink Maiden, which is later on in Game of Thrones. There's some stuff that happens there. So I kind of think it's a double meaning. I could be alone in this. I have not looked on Reddit to see if I'm
ready
correct,
to be convinced.
So both House Bracken and House Blackwood live on either side of the Red Fork. So House Bracken lives at Stonehenge, which is just south of the Red Fork. House Blackwood lives in Blackwood Vale, just north of the Red Fork. Those are the two houses that have been at war with each other since like the dawn of time. They've been at war for so long that they don't even remember why they are at war or don't like each other anymore. So anyway, a lot of their battles take place like near the Red Fork. So I imagine lots of blood has been spilled into the Red Fork.
I am convinced.
I'm just saying.
If I have my House of Dragon knowledge, they do fight a lot. And there's even a scene where there's a guy, I don't think it's the Red Fork, but there's a guy whose blood is getting washed down in the water. So I think
it's the Red Fork.
Oh, that is? Mm-hmm. Oh, I totally am on your boat then. I think it's because it's all the Bracken Blackwood blood.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll hear more about them this whole episode because they're all up in it. So then we move on to the Green Fork. The Green Fork actually starts up by the north, or in the north actually, because the swamplands, remember where the Cranog men live in the neck, that's where the Green Fork starts, and then gets lots of algae and moss from all those swamps trapped in it.
Man, these things don't sound great. Got blood and you got algae.
Yeah.
Water ain't great.
Well, supposedly silt or blood.
Yes. Regardless.
So mossy, algae, green waters. Then it flows south, and it flows straight through the lands that are held by House Frey, and we all know them. They have the two twin towers.
Yep.
The reason they are important is because their towers have a connecting bridge, like a stone bridge, pretty sturdy, and it's super easy to cross the Trident using their little bridge. But they figured that out a long, long time ago, and they started charging a toll. And now
We do see them in House of Dragon season 2, right?
you do, yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Later on.
they're loathed in the Game of Thrones series, but yeah, in House of the Dragon, they're still
Yep. They're still okay.
kind of
They're scummy a little.
they're playing the game.
Yeah. Get your bag, sister. Like I get it.
Yeah,
You do what you gotta do.
you gotta do. So I think the double meaning with this fork is that they're known to like charge an arm and a leg to cross their bridge, meaning they've made a lot of green.
Ah, yes, that cheddar cheese, if you will.
Yes. The blue fork, I think, really does have its name is that's the third fork, the blue fork. Just because of the color. I don't think there's a hidden meaning, or if there is one, I haven't found it yet. But it's called the blue fork because it has the purest water.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
It originates at a natural spring, and it's often described as sparkling.
So there is some clean water. The other two sound gross, but this one, I'm going to the Blue Fork. That's just me.
Blue fork. Yes.
That's actually like a good name for a restaurant.
It
The
is.
Blue Fork.
Ooh,
Yo.
that's our Westerosi themed restaurant.
When this podcast takes off, we're opening a restaurant called the Blue Fork.
Yes. So those are the three forks. Notable places along the Blue Fork are Seaguard, Old Stones, and Fairmarket. Those are all places. Don't quote me on this because I need to do a reread and I haven't. But I believe when Arya's kind of wandering around with the brothers with no banner, whatever, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I don't remember their name.
Brotherhood Without Banners or something like
Yep.
that. I know they stop at a couple of those places. And then Old Stones has its own lore. I don't get into it in this episode because I wanted to focus more on the Tullys, but Jenny of Old Stones, if you remember her, she's from the books, she's kind of like a ghosty person, but she knows things that people are like, how do you know that? So I like her story. Her story is interesting.
Mysterious.
And then the Ruby Ford is where all three of those forks connect. The blue and the green fork actually connect kind of up here a little bit north, and then the red fork comes in from the south. And then all three of them, once they're all joined, it's called the Ruby Ford. But that's kind of a new name. It was only started being called that because that's where Robert Baratheon defeated Rhaegar Targaryen in that war that they started over Lyanna Stark. And when he defeated him, when he landed his fatal blow, some of the rubies from Rhaegar's breastplate got dislodged and they fell into the river.
Fitting.
There. Yeah. But land-wise, this is a place where the King's Road that runs east-west. No, I lied to you. Sorry. The King's Road runs north-south. Runs into the River Road, which is east-west. So this is also another place where you can cross the Trident. And this is a much bigger bridge because it's wider here. The Twins is a pretty, it's easy and it's short because it's a short bridge to get across. You're just crossing the Green Fork, but down here you're crossing the big part.
Gotcha.
Yes. So there you have it. That's the Trident. The Trident. So back in the day, the Riverlands were settled by the first men. So there were countless, kind of like how he was saying earlier, there's a big name dump of all kinds of first men who settled in the Riverlands, all kinds of lords and families who kind of rose and fell as the ruling family of the Riverlands. But their stories were only ever passed down orally and never written. So they've mostly turned into myth and legend.
Yes.
The Maesters have found, I don't know where they're stored. I would think they're stored now down at the Citadel where the Maesters study, but they were found in the Riverlands. There's these stone tablets with some runes on them that are supposedly dated back to the first men, but they can't agree on how to translate these runes.
Oh boy, some politics behind the runes.
Yes, so we don't know what the runes say. And then some of the legendary characters that you might hear about from the era of the first men are Artos the Strong, Florian the Fool, Nine-Fingered Jack, Shara the Witch Queen, And then the Green King of the God's Eye. Told you.
The God's Eye keeps coming up.
I told you, we're not done with that place yet.
The
It's important.
Shara, the Witch Queen. That sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, I could look up the stories of all those. I didn't, but I should have maybe. But,
Shara, the Witch Queen.
Shara.
I just like the name.
yeah. So yes, remember, because the green, is it the green men?
Yeah.
That like they're like the keepers of the Isle of Faces. So apparently one of them was at some point a green king.
No.
So who knows? And then some of the family names from the first men that survived until present day are, you guessed it, Bracken and Blackwood.
There it is.
And then Fisher and Mud with 2 D's.
Oh.
And then Tully.
Oh, we know the Tullys. We love the Tullys.
We love the Tullys. Oopsies. So then the Andals showed up. And I'm going to do a deep dive on the Andals in the next episode, so bear with me for now. But they showed up with their fancy boats,
Oh.
which the first men had boats, kind of, but they were very crude.
Rickety.
Yes, so the Andals could easily sail up and down all the forks, the Trident, everything. So it was pretty easy for them to take over the Riverlands. Much easier than some of the other kingdoms, and they never made it really up north. So
I may be jumping the gun here, but I'm assuming the Andals and the First Men have beef.
beef,
Okay.
like Wagyu steak.
Oh my.
Yes. Because remember, at this point, the first men have kind of embraced the old gods.
Right.
The Andals come in hot with the Faith of the Seven.
Oh, they got the new gods.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes. There is this one little event called the Night in the White Wood, and that's supposedly where a bunch of children of the forest showed up under a hollow hill. I don't know what a hollow hill is, but
I don't either, but I'm in. It's like a hobbit hole?
yeah, baby.
Let me sick. We got hobbits confirmed.
And they use their, they kind of have magic, or they use their prayers, or whatever you want to call it. They send a bunch of wolves at the Andals,
Oh my.
and the wolves win. They
Hey yo.
tear those Andals apart.
Good.
And it all happened under a crescent moon.
I'm kind of anti-Andal at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then another event of note is perhaps the only time, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure the only time houses Bracken and Blackwood allied with each other and did not fight each other was to fight off the Andals.
Oh wow.
But they were defeated by 777 Andal knights with their 7 septons, all wearing the 7-pointed star. Sevens.
That's a lot of sevens.
A lot of
That might be his favorite casino game is the 777 slot machine.
the Faith of the Seven,
Yep.
taking him to Vegas. So yeah, that's how that went. It did not go well for the Brackens or Blackwoods, but then eventually the Andals come upon this place called High Heart, which was a sacred place for the first men and the children. It's this big hill, because it's the kingdom of rivers and hills, but this is a particularly large hill. And on top of that hill was a circle of weirwood trees. And so the children kind of gathered up there once they realized the Andals were down below. They called upon ravens and wolves to help them. They utilized their wood dancers have those weapons made out of like bird talons and teeth and stuff like that. But none of that was, not even the ravens or the wolves this time, because the Andals were prepared this time for the wolves. And none of those things were a match for the steel axes of the Andals. And the Andals succeeded. And then when the battle was over, they chopped down every weirwood at the top of the hill. And to this day, present day Game of Thrones, all you see up there is just the stumps, a circle of stumps.
Tragedy.
Yeah.
I really don't like the Andals. I'm not gonna lie.
I know. Well, they're interesting, that's for sure. And then at Old Stones, which Jenny of Old Stones is from there too, but this isn't her story. This is a different story. This is where House Mud kind of had their little keep and everything. And they put up one of the best and longest fights against the Andals, especially compared to the rest of the Riverlands houses. but they were ultimately defeated. And then once they were defeated, that's when the Andals kind of were like, that was our biggest hurdle. Yeah. So now that we've crossed that hurdle, now we're going to start intermarrying with the remaining families that are left over from the First Men. And that kind of ended the strong blood of the First Men in the Riverlands.
Tough.
So they still have some, but it's very intermingled at this point.
Aw.
Yes. So now that the Andal Kings are hanging out in the Riverlands, we've got a brief history of the Andal Kings, or whatever you want to call them, that kind of ruled over the Riverlands for a while, kind of a great while. So I'm going to try to keep it brief because this was another big name dump, and we don't love those, but
they're a lot.
They are important.
They are.
But so we start out with Sir Benedict the Bold. He was a great warrior. It took him 30 years. That's a whole life.
Yeah.
But he did eventually convince all of the lords of the Trident that lived near the Trident to bend their knees to him. And then once they all did, after those 30 years, he reigned for another 23 years. So he was around for a while. And then eventually he became known as Benedict the Just. And therefore, he just decided to change his last name to Justman. So originally he was bastard born, so his real last name was Rivers. He didn't think a king should have that last name, so he changed it to Justman. But then his descendants reigned for about 300 years after him. So it's a decently long.
That's not bad.
Next up in the line, we have Lord Torrance Teague. He stole a bunch of money from the Westerlands, which, that's fine. But then he used it to purchase a bunch of sellswords from Essos, the other continent.
Some mercenaries.
Yeah, sailed them over here, and they came and fought for him. He won, but his reign was never super secure. It ended with his great-grandson, so really only like 4-ish generations. But it is said that his great-grandson spent his entire reign a horse so that he could ride from one rebellion to the next.
Wow. You just like to fight, I guess.
Yeah, well, people didn't like him, so they kept rebelling.
I see what it's saying. Okay.
Yes. So, yes, and like previously stated, there's hardly ever a time when one house is not at war with another in the Riverlands. It's just a bloody little place to live, I guess.
Tough.
Yeah. It is. George Martin has said himself, the enmities run as deep as the rivers that water their lands.
That line was hard.
Homeboys know how to hold a grudge and foster some generational trauma.
Yeah, they sure do.
Who doesn't love it?
They thrive off of that.
And then we get to the time when they weren't ruled by their own people. For a time, the Storm Kings come in from the Stormlands, like Baratheon-ish people. I don't think it's not Baratheons because they weren't in power yet, but those lands come over to the Riverlands and they're like, hey, we need to help you out because you can't get your stuff together.
Can't get it together.
Yeah. So the Storm Kings show up because this bad guy called Hard Hand from the Iron Islands had sailed over to the Riverlands and was like taking over and letting his people reave and pillage and all kinds of bad stuff. So the Stormland people show up and they're like, we'll save you. And they did. And then, just kidding, we're going to just like take over the whole land from you.
Oh.
Yes. But yes, anyway, Hard Hand ends up winning them back. Gets him. He's from the Iron Islands. He reigns over the Riverlands for the rest of his life, and then his grandson is Harren the Black, who, if you don't recall...
I think I know where we're going with this. I didn't look, but...
he's the one that built that gigantic fortress called Harrenhal. It was supposed to be impregnable, and it was for a long time until, well, like maybe 20 years or so, until Aegon the Conqueror showed up. And we all know what happened then.
I'm not sure any fortress is impregnable against a dragon, so that's fair. Harrenhal, you had a good run, but...
He done burnt it to the ground.
Done diddly done did it.
And then after Aegon shows up, he names Lord Edmund Tully of Riverrun to be in control of the Riverlands.
There it is.
His title is Lord Paramount of the Trident.
That's a sick title.
So, and the reason Aegon the Conqueror liked the Tullys is because they were the first house in the Riverlands to bend their knee to him. They were super
enough.
loyal to him, and they were loyal to almost every Targaryen king all the way up until you get to the Mad King. So, yeah.
So I know you said it's the name dumps are unfortunate, but what I will say about Martin's name dumps, I hesitate to say better. It's just more digestible.
Yeah.
Because Tolkien, like, you got normal names here. You've got.
Oh, we're about to. You just wait. Hold on. You just
Okay.
hold
Maybe
on.
I'll buy my words, but like, in Tolkien, it's like Iunlandale and Iluvatar, and it's
Yeah.
like what? I can't remember these names. I mean, these are all over the place, but
Yeah.
I guess I'm about to buy my.
Well, no,
my
it's recognizable, but in a comical, you'll see. Hold on. Pause.
okay.
Just wait.
Okay.
All right, so that brings us to the House Tully, the Tully family. Yay, Tullys.
We love the Tullys.
So, to begin, the Tullys of Riverrun were never true kings like some of the other kingdom, like how the Starks used to be the kings of winter and all that. Tullys were never true kings, though they are connected by blood to many of the former kings or ruling families.
Just because that intermingling of
Yeah.
Gandalf's first men and then
Yep.
more after that. Okay.
Yes. So here are some of their physical traits. George R. R. Martin is super big on physical traits and how they are passed on genetically. Most fans know this pretty well, but if you're a light fan or a new fan,
That's me. I'm pointing at myself, podcast, if you can't say it.
skin color, hair color, eye color are like dead giveaways for like,
Who you are.
that's yo daddy or that's not yo daddy.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
so-
They're markers almost.
It's like Jerry Springer up in here.
It is. Wow. Okay.
So the Tullys are said to always have fair skin, blue eyes, and then red or auburn-ish hair.
Okay.
They follow the Faith of the Seven, and they have a sept in their keep. A sept is kind of like a little place of worship for the Faith of the Seven. So they have that in their keep. They do also, though, still keep a God's Wood. However, it's just used for relaxation, not religion.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't believe it has a werewood in it. It's just a God's Wood.
Okay.
Yeah. But they have some really cool funeral customs if you're into that.
What a thing to be known for. Hey,
Which
I mean,
it's
life
one
is.
of my favorite scenes in the show, and it does happen just like that in the book. Because a lot of times the show is not the book, but this scene in particular is exactly how it's written, and it's so funny. But here's their customs. If somebody passes away, especially a man or especially like a warrior, somebody of import, the deceased family member is placed onto a small boat. Especially men, they're usually clad in their armor and then their surcoat that has like their coat of arms and stuff on it. If it's a woman, I think they usually just place like a blanket-ish thing over her that has her house crest on it. You know what I mean? But anyway, so they put them in there. They've got a little wooden sword and shield. They are placed on their cloak. So their cloak kind of goes underneath of them so it can still keep them warm. They fill it full of heavy stones so that eventually it will sink.
Oh,
And then on top of the stones, they put like driftwood, kindling, scraps of parchment, stuff like that so that it will catch fire. And then in honor of the Faith of the Seven, they find 7 men, which are glorified pallbearers. They are chosen to push the funeral boat into the water. And remember, Riverrun sits on, I don't think we've talked about it yet. That's next. Riverrun sits on 2 separate rivers, so they push them into the river. And then they use a flaming arrow. They shoot it, and the flaming arrow is supposed to land neatly into the boat and catch fire.
Viking funeral.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Rad.
Yes. But
Now-
do you remember the show?
Don't they miss? Doesn't the guy miss like 4 times in a row or something?
Yes. So, yes, it's the funny, I think it's because that's why I love the show. Like, I don't love it because sometimes it doesn't follow the books and that kind of bothered me. But the comedic relief It was so funny, and that was one of the funniest scenes I thought, because it's like the guy, it's Catelyn Stark's dad is the one they're putting into the river, and Catelyn's brother Edmure, who we're going to talk about in a minute. He's supposed to be shooting this flaming arrow. He keeps missing, and then their uncle, he has to step in and be like, "This is how it's done."
And one shot,
Yeah.
just done. That was a tough look for the guy. Yeah, that's,
Yeah. Yes, but yeah,
that sounds like a
their-
lit funeral service. Give us a
Lit.
see
Lit.
what I did there.
All right, so let's talk about Riverrun itself. It is a red castle, or it's described as red in the book. It was commissioned by Lord Axel Tully, and it sits at the juncture of the Red Fork and the Tumbledown River. Those two kind of join up, and the Tumbledown makes the Red Fork even bigger than it already was. And it's a good strategic place because you can quickly get to many other parts in the Riverlands from that juncture, either by land or boat. So it's also kind of naturally protected from a land invasion, kind of, because it sits on water. The way they protect themselves from a land invasion is they've got this really cool like lock and dam system built into the castle. So there's a moat around their castle, just like most castles, but they can use their lock and dam system to like flood the moat basically from the river. And so then it basically turns the whole castle into an island.
I like that.
You can't get to it from land. So it's very sturdy. It's built well. It's been besieged a lot of times, but never actually taken. Or rarely, I guess, not never, but rarely actually taken by whoever is besieging them. And it's never been taken by surprise. They always know when those people are coming because of the water.
It's hard to sneak an army across the water.
Yeah.
Across the water. Is that what it is?
Across a
River?
body of water. There you go.
It's getting late, folks.
is.
I've had 2 coffees and an energy drink. It's just, my brain's shutting off.
So yeah, that's the cool part about Riverrun. That's where Catelyn Tully grew up, if you recall.
Yep.
And then we'll do a brief little with more names. These are the fun names, so buckle in.
Yes.
Buckle, strap in. This is a non-spoiler history of House Tully from Aegon the Conqueror to present day GOT. I'm going to skip a lot of details. I won't skip names, but I'm going to skip a lot of details when it's House of the Dragon era, because I don't want to give anything away. But we start out way back. Aegon the Conqueror named Lord Edmund,
Yep.
the Lord Paramount of the Trident. He actually then at some point went and was the hand of the king to Aegon for 2 years, and then he went back to Riverrun and stayed there. Skip a few Targaryen kings, and then we get a whole generation of Tullys named after Sesame Street characters.
It's such a shame we have to pause right here because your computer's going to die.
Oh, shoot. Okay, yeah.
That's wild.
I know.
What? Is this real?
It's real. It's real.
Oh,
So go plug
God.
her in. She's got a plug over there. I forgot to plug it into the thingy.
That's okay.
Cut.
I didn't want it to die in the middle of
Cut.
high racing. Oh. The charging.
There she goes.
Yes.
Do you want me to redo that part?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll act surprised again.
All right. Ready, set. So 1, 2, skip a few Targaryen kings, and then we get a whole generation of Tullys who are named after Sesame Street characters.
That can't be real.
It's real. It's real. All right.
I
you
feel
ready?
like sometimes Martin just does these things just
for fun.
for fun.
Funsies. Yeah. So we start with Lord Grover. Lord Grover Tully. He was alive during the reign of King Viserys, so right at the beginning of House of the Dragon, season 1. And by the time the Dance of the Dragons erupts, so kind of the end of season 1 and all of season 2, Lord Grover is elderly and he's on his deathbed. And we don't know his son's name. We still don't. Apparently his son was not important. I don't know.
Cookie Monster?
Could be. Who knows? But his grandson is Lord Elmo.
Oh my God. He doesn't
And-
stop.
No. And at the end of season 2, we saw Lord Elmo join the Dance of the Dragons for Team Black with Daemon Targaryen, and then
Wait,
Rhaenyra
Elmo
shows
was
up.
in the show?
He's the kid, the young kid.
That's Elmo?
Lord Elmo.
Oh, man. All right.
Yes. And then no spoilers. Actually, I think in the show they just go ahead and skip to Oscar. They might have named him Oscar. I can't remember. Anyway,
There's an Oscar?
well, yeah,
Is he a grouch?
he could be.
Could be.
Don't know. But no spoilers about any of the events that Lord Elmo partakes in. But Lord Elmo then goes on to have 2 sons named Oscar and Kermit.
This is. God, George. I feel like this guy, when he was writing this part, took a few too many hits off the old devil's lettuce, if you know what I
Or
mean.
had a strong edible.
Yeah.
Yes. So yes, we just to recap, we had Grover, Elmo, Oscar,
Yep.
and Kermit.
I'm waiting for Cookie Monster to show up.
That's it. That's it. There's only those 4. Because then we get back to your regularly scheduled Westerosi names. We're going to skip a couple more Targaryen kings, and then we arrive at Lord Hoster Tully. And he's the father of Lady Catelyn,
Oh,
Lady Lysa, and then Lord Edmure. Those 3 are siblings.
Edmure's the guy who can't shoot a bow to save his life.
Edmure cannot.
Is that canon?
It is, yes.
He actually missed.
He missed.
Oh, wow. That's tough. For his dad's funeral? Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's a little awkward.
And then Lord Hoster has a brother, Brynden. But he and Brynden grew up together, and they were always very close until Hoster inherited the Riverlands and had to take over as a lord. And then he apparently kept trying to arrange marriages for his brother, like political marriages mostly. And Brynden refused every offer.
Oh,
This led to kind of a lifelong feud between them in adulthood. Remember, they were very close as kids growing up, but this was like kind of an adulthood feud. Lasted all the way for the rest of their relationship. George never specifies why Brynden resists marriage, because I think he like specifically came out and said that, like, I haven't said why, and I think because fans were starting to speculate things or whatever, but he just was like, I don't know why. I haven't
just cause.
Yeah.
He does a lot of just causes, though, to be fair.
Yeah. So yeah, we don't know why he keeps refusing all these marriage offers, but he is known. This is another funny story. This is why I love the Tullys, because they're like a little bit the comedic relief.
I was going to say, they got the fun lore.
Yeah, like they are kind of all about honor as well, just like the Starks are. But the Starks are so serious, and I love the Starks, but they're so serious.
Yes.
The Tullys are a little bit like cheeky.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's known as the Blackfish because Lord Hoster was once talking to Catelyn. Catelyn was a young girl at this point, and he was telling Catelyn that your uncle Brynden, he's the black sheep of the Tully family. But Brynden was standing right there, evidently, and turned around and was like, our sigil is a fish, so I would be a blackfish.
Oh, my God.
And now that's his nickname. All
Incredible.
These years later, yes. Lady Catelyn was always her dad's favorite, which I think the show does a good job of showing.
Yep.
Much to her sister Lysa's displeasure.
Fair enough.
Sibling rivalry at
Always.
its best.
Got to have it in Game of Thrones.
And then Catelyn, as we all know, was supposed to marry Brandon Stark, but he was murdered by the Mad King, so she married his little brother Ned instead. And then Lady Lysa ended up marrying Lord John Arryn of the Vale, even though John Arryn was about 30 years older than her.
Oh.
He was almost elderly at the time that they married. It was a 100% political marriage. He needed a new wife and a new heir because his current heir had died in battle recently. So Lord Tully was like, "Here you go. Here's
Ew,
here's
that's just awful. Political marriage is just
it's a rough time.
disgusting.
Yeah, rough time. And then Lord Edmure, poor Lord Edmure, he just can't get anything right. He is the runner-up that gets offered to House Frey. After Robb Stark was supposed to marry a daughter of House Frey and didn't because he had already married Jane Westerling. And he was like, but here's my uncle instead, guys. It's all cool.
It was not cool.
Not cool.
Not cool.
The red wedding happens. And
I
this,
still have PTSD about this
oh, I
episode.
know. And in the book, it's really sad in the book too. He survives the Red Wedding. Edmure does, not Rob.
Yep.
Edmure does, but we don't really know a whole lot beyond that.
Interesting.
We know he's survived, probably isn't being treated well, but we don't know details.
Kind of fades into the wind, huh?
Yeah, and I'm not going to do a whole big deep dive on the Red Wedding today because it involves way more families and politics and stuff, so we're not going to get into that today, but we will eventually. So, because I do want to do a deep dive on it. There's
We
so
have
much
to,
that goes into
as much
it.
pain as I'm going to endure.
And it has a different, it's different than the show. And there's a
Oh.
different outcome in the show
Good to know.
for more than one character than what they depict.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now I'm intrigued.
All right. And then last but not least, before we end our time in the Riverlands, I wanted to talk about the rotating Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. I mean the Lords of Harrenhal.
One and the same.
It's like how in Harry Potter when they can't keep the same teacher, it's always
Yep.
renewed. That's how Harrenhal is.
It's haunted.
Haunted. It's cursed. Nobody really knows. But yeah, there's been a lot of lords up there. So here's just a few. It started out with Black Heron. His rule ended when Aegon the Conqueror showed up, burned the whole thing to the ground.
Tragedy.
And since then, it's passed on to numerous houses due to the uncanny tendency of each of those families' lines to end while they are holding Harrenhal.
Oh God, really?
Yeah.
That's no way that's a coincidence.
Nope. So we started out with House Coharis. I think I'm saying that right. They took over for House Heron, but didn't last long. Kind of a boring story. I'm not going to get into it. House Haraway took over. They were closely allied with King Maegor the Cruel, which sounds great, but he's called King Maegor the Cruel for a reason.
Not a good guy.
He ultimately killed all of the Haraways.
We're off to a hot start.
King Maegor then announced that the strongest of his knights would be granted Harrenhal, and 23 of them proceeded to duke it out in a bloody fight.
Oh boy.
Sir Walton Towers succeeded, so House Towers now holds Harrenhal. However, soon after getting Harrenhal, he died of his wounds from the fight. But his line survived. He had an heir for 2 more generations. His son, he had an heir, and then his son had a son, so it was his grandson. But his grandson had no heirs. I don't know if he didn't have children or if all his children died. I'm not sure, but he died with no heirs.
Tragic, but like not as tragic as I'm sure we're about to get. So
Yes, then we come to House Strong, and we met and got familiar. We are still familiar with House Strong in House of the Dragon.
yep.
So Lionel Strong is the father that gets awarded Harrenhal. He's a really smart guy. And the show kind of lets you know that, but they just didn't have enough time really to introduce us to the father. We saw Harwin, and we still see Larys, but we didn't have enough time with the dad to really grasp like how smart he is. He has 6 links in his chain from the Citadel, which just means he studied with the Maesters for a long time.
Wow.
You have to like prove that you've learned certain things to get a link in your chain. And you're not a full maester until you've got the whole chain. But 6 links is nothing to laugh at. It's a pretty big deal.
Nothing to scoff at.
No, not at all. So he's a smart guy. Old King Jaehaerys is who gave him Harrenhal, who was like a very peaceful, good king. He was well respected. He was the master of laws and the hand of the king to Jaehaerys. And then his 2 sons grew up at court because he was the hand of the king. His 2 sons are Sir Harwin, who is maybe, probably, definitely the biological father
100%.
of Rhaenyra's oldest sons, because hair color
Matters.
and skin color
Sure matters.
sure does. So that was Sir Harwin. He was one of the Kingsguard. I was like, why can't I think of that?
Yep.
He was one of the Kingsguard for
A lot of terms.
Viserys. And then we all know Sir Larys and
Yep.
his foot fetish.
It's a little weird.
Yeah. And the mysterious fire that happened at Harrenhal, which is a place that is constantly damp and has leaks from the roof because there is no roof because it burned down. But there was a fire, a mysterious fire, killed Sir Harwin and his father both.
I think we know who done did it.
Yes. Yeah, the show definitely went ahead and just showed you because the people that set the fire were wearing those little bees, and Sir Larys has a bee in his cane. So they went ahead and just said, this is who set the fire or who ordered the fire to be set. The book does not clarify that, but well, I digress.
Yep.
So yeah, and then we're going to stop there. We're not going to go any further with Larys because of spoilers, but in the show, Larys is hanging out. He's the Lord of Harrenhal, but he's still at court, trying to be the Master of Whisperers and all that. Okay, skip a generation or so, or 2 or 3, I'm not sure. Then we get to House Lothston. They were granted Harrenhal, held it for a while before heading to King's Landing to serve as Hand of the King. But he only lasted as Hand of the King for like a year, got banished back to Harrenhal. And it's said that their line ended in madness and chaos.
Oh, God.
When the wife, I think, started using black magic. So,
This place is not good.
it's not.
If somebody said, here's Harold, I'd just be like,
I'd be like, I'm good.
I'm good. You keep it.
I'm gonna stay a peasant.
I'm gonna go hang out with the Tullys over here.
Yeah. And then we get to present day Game of Thrones, and House Went is who currently holds it. They had previously been in service to the Lothstons, but they turned against them in the end because of the black magic, you know.
Yep, as I probably would too.
And so then, as a reward for turning against the Lothstons, they were rewarded Harrenhal.
Is that a reward? Or is that...
Yeah, it says they still hold it in present day Game of Thrones, but their family has seen many tragedies.
I'm sure they'll see many more based off of what I've just heard.
Yes. So yeah, there's a quick little look back at the haunting of Harrenhal.
Harrenhal fascinates the heck out of me, though.
We need the people that make the haunting of Hill House to make the
Haunting of Harrenhal. God, do it. Come on, HBO. Sitting on gold right now.
Yep. All
That's
right.
cool.
So that's a wrap on the old Riverlands.
I did not know they had that much history.
Yeah.
I knew the Tullys, but like I didn't know about the Three Forks, and I want to live in the blue one. That's all. I know.
The blue, yeah.
The red and the green. I'm good.
And no Harrenhal for
No Harrenhal for me. I'm good. I'm gonna stay away from that. Actually, I'm not gonna stay in the Riverlands at all because apparently they fight a lot. So
They do. It's a bloody place to live for sure.
maybe eventually I'll find where I want to live because so far we have the North where it's cold, and so
I like the North.
But you gotta bundle up all the time.
Well, I like to bundle.
You want to live in the long night?
Well, they all did.
I couldn't do it. I'm weak. Send me to like the beaches of somewhere. I don't know.
Dorn, you're a Dornish.
okay,
You're
I'm bored.
Dornishman.
All right. Fair enough. But that was fascinating.
It's the rivers.
I think is that a wrap for
wrap.
today? All right. Well, fellow adventurers, that is a wrap for today's journey into the realms of Westeros and Middle Earth. We hope you've enjoyed journeying through the histories, mysteries, and fascinating lore of these worlds.
We will return with insights, laughs, and maybe even some unexpected dragons of wisdom along the way. Next up in our Middle Earth adventure, we will learn more about Faenor and Beleriand.
Yes,
Right.
and
And
Melkor's Reckoning is what I'll call it.
Okay, Melkor's Reckoning. Love that. Our tour of Westeros is going to take us back in time to the Andal invasion. We'll learn more about them, and we will learn about the faith that they brought with them, the faith of the Seven.
Yes. But we encourage you guys to join in on our conversations online, share your theories, tell us your grievances, or just chat about how you discover these epic sagas yourself.
And then once again, our Instagram handle is at forthelove.lore.
She's absolutely crushing it. Please check it out.
We just want to know things like what's your favorite character arc in Game of Thrones, or your favorite battle scene in The Lord of the Rings. Anything.
So thank you for tuning in, and remember, the best adventures are the ones we take together. We swear it by the old gods and the new. Peace.